I stood watching Sarah adjust her wedding veil when Derek grabbed the back of my head and drove my face straight into the 3-tier cake. Frosting filled my nostrils as guests gasped. "Try some dessert, beggar," he announced to 200 people. Sarah laughed. Through vanilla cream blurring my vision, I saw my other children recording on their phones, smirking. What they didn't know was that the homeless drunk they'd hidden from their social circles for 5 years was about to reveal exactly why I'd been living that way. My name is Grayson Whitfield, and until 5 years ago, I had everything a man could want. At 62, I owned Whitfield Investment Group, a firm I'd built from nothing into a $300 million enterprise. My wife Margaret and I had raised 3 children in our Westchester mansion, Sarah, our eldest, at 32, James at 30, and Marcus at 28. I'd given them everything: private schools, Ivy League educations, seed money for their ventures, even bought their first homes. Margaret used to joke that I'd spoil them rotten, but I'd wave her concerns away. "They're good kids," I'd tell her over our morning coffee. "They understand the value of family." The morning that changed everything started like any other. Margaret kissed me goodbye before heading to her charity board meeting. 2 hours later, I got the call that shattered my world. A drunk driver had run a red light, hitting Margaret's car at 70 miles per hour. She died instantly. I survived the notification only to collapse from a massive heart attack brought on by the shock. I woke up 3 weeks later in a hospital bed, tubes down my throat, machines beeping around me. The doctors said I'd flatlined twice. My motor functions were impaired, my speech slurred, and my memory foggy. But I was alive, and my children were there, tears streaming down their faces. "Don't worry, Dad," Sarah had whispered, holding my trembling hand. "We'll take care of everything." Those words would haunt me later. Recovery was brutal. Physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. My days blurred into endless sessions of relearning basic functions. My children seemed supportive, visiting daily, bringing grandchildren to cheer me up. James handled my company affairs. Marcus managed the estate, and Sarah coordinated my medical care. When they suggested I sign a temporary power of attorney so they could pay my bills and manage my treatment, it seemed sensible. My signature was shaky, but I trusted them completely. 6 months into recovery, I'd progressed enough to ask about returning home. That's when Sarah's expression changed. "Dad, about that," she'd said, exchanging glances with her brothers. "The house, we had to sell it. The medical bills were astronomical, and the company, there were some bad investments." I struggled to process this. Bad investments. I'd been conservative with the firm's portfolio for decades. But my children showed me documents, financial statements, that seemed to confirm massive losses. In my foggy state, I couldn't quite grasp the details, but the bottom line was clear: almost everything was gone. "We've found you a nice apartment," Marcus added quickly. "1 bedroom, easy to manage, and we've set up a monthly allowance from what's left." The apartment was a far cry from my 7-bedroom mansion. 900 square feet in a building that smelled of cabbage and cigarette smoke. The monthly allowance they provided, $3,000, came with strict oversight. Sarah would review my bank statements, questioning any purchase over $50. "It's for your own good, Dad," she'd explain. "In your condition, you need structure." My condition. They mentioned it often, but remained vague about specifics. When I pressed for details, they'd exchange those glances again. It took me 8 months to piece together what they'd done. Late nights at the public library, teaching myself to use computers again, searching through public records with painstaking slowness. What I found made my blood run cold. Medical documents filed with the court claimed I suffered from severe dementia and alcohol-induced brain damage. Psychiatric evaluations I'd never undergone diagnosed me with various cognitive disorders. Based on these forgeries, my children had been granted full conservatorship. They hadn't just managed my company, They'd liquidated it, selling assets to shell companies for pennies on the dollar. Shell companies that, after hours of research, I traced back to them. The house hadn't been sold to pay medical bills. They'd transferred it to themselves through a complex trust arrangement. My investment accounts, my car collection, my art. Everything had been parceled out among them while I lay in a hospital bed, learning to walk again. But they'd made one mistake. In their greed, they'd been sloppy. Several offshore accounts I'd established years ago for tax purposes had been overlooked. They didn't know about the Swiss accounts under my mother's maiden name, or the Singapore investments held through a trust Margaret had helped me create. In total, nearly $80 million had escaped their notice. The question was what to do with this knowledge. I sat in my dingy apartment, staring at printouts spread across my second-hand coffee table. My children had stolen from me, betrayed me, left me to rot while they lived in luxury. Sarah had taken over Margaret's charity positions, playing the gracious society lady with my money. James drove my vintage Ferrari to his new office, a building purchased with funds from my liquidated company. Marcus lived in a penthouse bought with proceeds from our family home. The old Grayson would have confronted them, immediately demanded justice through lawyers and courts. But the old Grayson was gone. The man who emerged from that hospital bed was different. Older, yes. Weaker in body, certainly. But with a clarity of purpose that only comes from losing everything. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't just reclaim what was mine. I would teach my children the lesson I'd failed to impart when I'd handed them everything on a silver platter. They would learn what it meant to earn, to struggle, to face consequences. I picked up a prepaid phone I'd bought with cash and dialed a number I'd memorized decades ago. Walter Brennan had been my roommate at Yale before joining the FBI. We'd stayed close through the years, and he'd retired recently to a farm in Virginia. "Walter," I said when he answered. "It's Grayson. I need your help." There was silence on the line. Then, Jesus Christ, Sarah told me she said you weren't yourself anymore. That's what they want everyone to believe. Can we meet somewhere private? 3 days later, I took a Greyhound bus to Virginia. Walter almost didn't recognize me when I walked into the diner we'd agreed upon. The months of illness had aged me, and I deliberately let myself look disheveled to avoid attention. "My God, Gray," he breathed as I sat down. "What have they done to you?" I told him everything, showed him the documents, the evidence I'd gathered. His face grew darker with each revelation. "Those little bastards," he growled. "Margaret would be rolling in her grave." "I need your help, Walter. Not for revenge, for justice, and for education." He leaned back, studying me. "What did you have in mind?" "I'm going to disappear," I said simply. "Let them think they've won completely. Let them believe their father has become exactly what they claim, a broken-down drunk with nothing to his name. Meanwhile, I rebuild. I gather evidence. And when the time is right, I teach them what it means to truly lose everything." Walter's smile was cold. "Count me in." As I rode the bus back to the city that night, I thought about the irony. My children had invented a fiction about my mental state to steal my fortune. Now I would make that fiction reality, not because I'd lost my mind, but because I'd finally found my purpose. They wanted me invisible. I would become invisible. But like all the best predators, I would strike from the shadows when they least expected it. The transformation began simply enough. I stopped shaving regularly, let my hair grow wild, and wore the same clothes for days at a time. When Sarah made her monthly check-in visits, I made sure to have empty beer bottles visible, slurred my words slightly, and repeated stories. Her disgust was palpable. "Dad, you're getting worse," she said during one visit, wrinkling her nose at the deliberately musty smell I'd cultivated in the apartment. "Maybe we should look into facilities." I played my part perfectly, becoming agitated at the suggestion, knocking over a glass with a trembling hand. "I'm fine here, don't need any damn facility." She left quickly, as I knew she would. Later, through Walter's surveillance equipment, we heard her on the phone with James. "He's deteriorating fast. Give it another year and we can have him committed. That'll free up the conservatorship completely." The next phase required more commitment. I abandoned the apartment they paid for, leaving behind empty bottles and rambling notes. Let them think I'd wandered off in a drunken haze. In reality, I'd spent weeks preparing. Walter had helped me establish a new identity. William Gray, a veteran down on his luck. With this identity, I could access my hidden accounts without triggering any alerts. I spent my nights in homeless shelters, but my days were productive. The public library became my office. Using their computers, I slowly rebuilt my network. Former colleagues who'd been told I was mentally incompetent were shocked to receive encrypted emails proving my lucidity. Most were eager to help once they learned the truth. Richard Thornton, my former CFO, was particularly incensed. "I knew something was off when James sold the company," he said during a clandestine meeting in a park. "The buyers were obviously shell companies, but James had all the legal documents. We couldn't fight it." "You won't need to fight," I assured him. "Just document everything. Keep records. When the time comes, we'll need evidence that would hold up in court." Through Richard, I learned more about my children's activities. They'd been sloppy in their greed, leaving paper trails everywhere. James had used company funds for personal expenses before the sale. Marcus had engaged in insider trading with information stolen from my files. Sarah had embezzled from the charity funds she now controlled. But the most interesting discovery came from an unexpected source. One evening at the shelter, I recognized a familiar face. Robert Morrison Jr., Derek to his friends. The son of my oldest business rival sat across from me at dinner, clearly uncomfortable in the environment. "Doing community service," he explained to anyone who asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "Judge's orders. Some nonsense about a bar fight." I kept my head down, eating quietly, but my ears were sharp. Derek spent the evening on his phone, loudly discussing his business ventures and romantic conquests. When he mentioned Sarah Whitfield, my daughter, I nearly choked on my soup. "Yeah, the old man's fortune is practically mine already," he boasted to whoever was on the other end. "Sarah thinks it's true love. She has no idea Dad orchestrated the whole thing. Once we're married, we'll have access to everything the Whitfield kids took. Dad always said the best revenge is patient revenge." The pieces clicked into place. Robert Morrison Sr. had tried to destroy my company through hostile takeover attempts for years. When that failed, he'd apparently decided on a longer game, using his son to marry into my family and claim what I'd built through marriage. That night, I called Walter from a burner phone. "We need to dig into the Morrison family, everything. Finances, connections, dirty secrets." "On it," Walter replied. "By the way, your kids filed a missing person report. They're playing concerned family in public while hoping you never turn up." I smiled grimly. Let them hope. Months passed in this pattern. By day, a disheveled vagrant shuffling through the streets. By night, a phantom rebuilding an empire. I established new companies under various names, invested my hidden funds wisely, and watched them grow. The 80 million I'd started with swelled to 150 million, then 200 million, then more. Walter's investigation into the Morrisons revealed a goldmine of criminal activity. Money laundering through real estate tax evasion, bribery of city officials. Robert Sr. had built his fortune on corruption. Derek was the heir to a criminal empire, and he was drawing my daughter into it. Sarah's already helping them launder money, Walter reported during one of our meetings. "She's using the charity as a front. Donations go in, clean money comes out through fake programs." My heart ached. Margaret had built that charity to help underprivileged children get educational opportunities. Now our daughter was using it to wash dirty money. The homeless shelter became an unexpected asset. People talk freely around those they consider beneath notice. Business executives volunteering for photo opportunities discussed insider information. City officials revealed corrupt dealings. I listened to everything, remembering everything, building files on everyone. One night, Derek returned for another community service shift. This time he brought friends, other young men from wealthy families, all there under court orders. They spent the evening mocking the regular shelter residents, making cruel jokes about addiction and mental illness. "Look at that one!" Derek pointed at me as I sat reading a discarded newspaper. "Probably used to be somebody. Now look at him. This is why you never let your guard down in business. Moment of weakness and you end up like that." His friends laughed. One threw a dinner roll at me, hitting me in the shoulder. I didn't react, just continued reading as if nothing had happened. "See, completely gone," Derek announced. "My future father-in-law is heading the same way. Sarah says he's turned into a total drunk. Lost everything, lives in some rat-hole apartment. She's embarrassed to even mention him." "Why don't you just have him committed?" one friend suggested. "Oh, we will." Derek smiled. "After the wedding. Need to make sure all the paperwork is ironclad first. Then the old drunk goes to a state facility, and we get full control of the conservatorship." They moved on, but I remained frozen newspaper trembling in my hands. They were planning to lock me away. My own daughter was conspiring with her boyfriend to have me institutionalized. That night, I made a decision. Playing the long game was no longer enough. I needed to accelerate my plans. "Walter," I said when he answered his secure phone, "how quickly can we move?" "Depends on what you have in mind." "Sarah's getting married to Derek Morrison." There was silence on the line. "Then when?" "I don't know yet. But when she does, that's when we strike. Start positioning everything. I want to own them before they even say, 'I do.'" Walter chuckled darkly. "You know what I love about this plan? They think you're the prey. They have no idea they're walking into the hunter's trap." I hung up and looked around the shelter dormitory. 50 beds filled with people society had written off. In 6 months, I'd gone from mansion to homeless shelter, from respected businessman to invisible vagrant. But unlike the others here, my fall was calculated, strategic. My children thought they'd destroyed me. The Morrisons thought they'd won a decades-long rivalry. They were all wrong. In the shadows, I was building something they couldn't imagine, their complete and utter downfall. The shelter lights went out at 10 p.m. sharp. In the darkness, I smiled. Let them plan their wedding. Let them dream of the wealth they'd steal. I would be there, invisible in plain sight, ready to show them what it truly meant to lose everything. But first I had to wait. Patience, as Robert Morrison Sr. had said, was the key to revenge. He just didn't realize the lesson would apply to him as well. 6 months before the wedding, that would change everything, I had my first real encounter with Sarah and Derek as a couple. I'd been tracking their relationship through Walter's surveillance and my network of allies, but seeing them together in person hit differently. I was sitting outside a Starbucks on Madison Avenue, playing my role as a disheveled vagrant, when I spotted Sarah's distinctive blonde hair through the window. She was at a corner table with Derek, and a woman I recognized as Vivian Clark, the city's most exclusive wedding planner. Pure instinct made me shuffle inside. The barista behind the counter wrinkled her nose as I approached. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a place of business." "Just wanted some water," I mumbled, making my voice rougher than necessary. That's when Sarah looked up. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, then horror. "Oh my God," she whispered. Then louder, "Dad!" Derek turned in his chair, his handsome face twisting with disgust. "This is your father." I shuffled closer to their table, noting the wedding magazine's fabric swatches and venue photos spread across the surface. "Sarah, sweetheart," didn't mean to interrupt. "Security," Derek called out immediately. "We need security here now." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Derek, stop. He's my father." "I don't care who he is. He smells like a dumpster and he's disturbing our meeting." Derek stood, using his 6'2" frame to tower over me. "Listen, old man, you're embarrassing your daughter. Why don't you crawl back to whatever gutter you came from?" Vivian Clark was recording everything on her phone, probably thinking this would make great gossip for her wealthy clients. I played my part perfectly, swaying slightly, letting my eyes water. "Just wanted to say hello to my little girl," I said. "Haven't seen you in months, Sarah. You don't visit anymore." Sarah's face flushed red. "Dad, please, not here, not now." "When then?" I pressed. "You getting married? My baby girl getting married, and I don't even know about it." Derek laughed a cruel sound that reminded me of his father. "You think we'd invite you to our wedding? Look at yourself. You're pathetic." I let my shoulders slump, played up the tremor in my hands. I could clean up. Get a suit. I still remember how to behave proper. "No," Sarah said firmly, her voice cold. "Dad, you're not invited. You'd embarrass everyone. Derek's family is very important, and I won't have you ruining everything with your drinking and your condition." $500,000, Vivian Clark said suddenly, as if to fill the awkward silence. "That's what your daughter's spending on her special day. The Morrison estate in the Hamptons, 400 guests, designer, everything. It's going to be the event of the season." I turned my watery eyes to the wedding planner. 500,000. That's more than I've seen in years. "Which is exactly why you won't be there," Derek interjected. He pulled out his wallet and threw a $20 bill at me. It hit my chest and fluttered to the floor. "Here, buy yourself a meal, or more likely another bottle. Just stay away from us." I bent slowly to pick up the money, my knees creaking. As I straightened, I caught Derek's eyes. For just a moment, I let him see something else there, a flash of the man I used to be. He blinked uncertain, but then I was shuffling again, mumbling my thanks. "Sarah." I tried one more time. "Your mother would have wanted—" "Don't you dare!" Sarah hissed, standing abruptly. "Don't you dare invoke Mom! She'd be disgusted by what you've become. We all are." The security guard had arrived, a young man who looked uncomfortable with the situation. Derek took charge immediately. "Remove this vagrant from the premises. If he comes back, call the police." As the guard took my arm gently, I heard Derek say to Sarah, "We need to speed up those commitment papers. He's getting worse." I let myself be led out, but not before hearing Sarah's response. "After the wedding, I don't want any complications before then." Outside, I shuffled away, but Walter was already on it. He'd been in the coffee shop the whole time, just another customer working on his laptop. That night, he played me the full recording from the bug he'd planted near their table. "The prenup is brilliant," Derek was saying. "My dad's lawyer drew it up. If she initiates divorce in the first 10 years, she gets nothing. Meanwhile, I get full access to her trust funds and that conservatorship over her father." "Derek, you make it sound so calculating." Sarah had laughed. "I thought you loved me." "Of course I love you, babe. But love doesn't mean being stupid about money. Your brothers signed similar agreements with their spouses. It's just good business." "I suppose," Sarah had agreed. "God knows we need to protect assets from Dad. Did I tell you he called James last week ranting about stolen money? James had to block his number." The conversation had continued, revealing more details. The wedding date, June 21st. The guest list, a who's who of New York society, including several judges, the district attorney, and numerous Wall Street executives. The Morrisons were pulling out all the stops to make this a merger of dynasties. But it was the discussion about me that proved most valuable. "Your father really was somebody once, wasn't he?" Vivian had asked. "One of the best investment minds of his generation," Sarah admitted. "But that was before the accident. The head trauma, it changed him, made him paranoid, delusional. He thinks we stole from him, can you believe it? We saved what we could from his bad decisions." "Must be hard," Vivian sympathized. "The hardest part is knowing he's out there potentially embarrassing us at any moment," Derek added. "That's why we need to take action after the wedding. My father knows a judge who can expedite involuntary commitment. 6 months from now, he'll be getting the help he needs and we'll all be able to move on." Walter paused the recording. They're planning to lock you up in a state psychiatric facility. Derek's father has a judge in his pocket. I stared at the laptop screen, thinking. Good. Let them plan. But we need more. I want to know everything about this prenup, every dirty deal the Morrisons have made, every skeleton in Derek's closet. Over the next few weeks, Walter worked his magic. The prenuptial agreement was a masterpiece of manipulation. Not only would Sarah get nothing in a divorce, but any children would automatically remain with Derek. Furthermore, the agreement gave Derek power of attorney over Sarah's finances if she was ever deemed mentally incompetent, the same trick my children had used on me. Like father, like children, Walter commented. She's walking into the exact same trap she set for you. But there was more. Derek had a secret that not even his father knew about. Through careful investigation, Walter discovered Derek had a massive gambling problem. He owed $3 million to some very dangerous people debts he was keeping hidden until after the wedding when he could tap into Sarah's money. It gets better, Walter said during one of our meetings in a dingy motel room. Or worse, depending on how you look at it. Derek's not just marrying Sarah for her money, he's got 2 other women on the side. One's pregnant. I felt sick. Despite everything Sarah had done to me, she was still my daughter. Does she know? Of course not. Derek's careful. But I've got photos, text messages, even a lease agreement for an apartment he keeps for his mistresses. I studied the evidence spread across the motel bed. My daughter was about to marry a man who would destroy her just as she'd destroyed me. Part of me thought it was poetic justice. The other part, the father in me, wanted to warn her. No, Walter said, reading my expression. You warn her now, she won't believe you. Worse, it'll tip our hand. We stick to the plan. He was right, of course. But that didn't make it easier. 2 months before the wedding, I made another calculated appearance. James was having lunch at his favorite restaurant, the one he used to take me to when he was trying to impress potential investors. I shuffled past his outdoor table just as he was closing a deal with some Japanese businessman. His face went white when he saw me. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said quickly, standing to intercept me. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Heard Sarah's getting married," I said loudly enough for his guests to hear. "My little girl, remember when she was in ballet? You used to drive her to practice when I was traveling." James grabbed my arm, roughly steering me away from the table. "You're embarrassing yourself. And me. Leave. Now." "I don't have anywhere to go," I whined. "The apartment. I lost it. Been sleeping rough." "That's not my problem," James hissed. "You made your choices." "Please, son, just a few dollars for food." James looked back at his table where the businessmen were watching with interest. With visible disgust, he pulled out his wallet and shoved $50 at me. "Take this and go, and Dad, don't come near me again. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a father anymore." I took the money with shaking hands. "What about the wedding? Can I at least—" "No, Sarah made it clear. You're not invited. You're not welcome. You're nothing to us anymore." As I shuffled away, I heard him return to his table, apologizing profusely. "My apologies. My father, he's not well. Alzheimer's, you understand. Very sad." That night, Walter played me another recording. James on the phone with Marcus. "He showed up at Delmonico's today. Cost me the Takashi deal. The Japanese were too polite to say anything, but I could see their discomfort. We need to do something about him." "Sarah's plan is solid," Marcus replied. "After the wedding, he goes away permanently. Until then, we just have to manage the situation. Maybe we should hire someone to keep tabs on him. Make sure he doesn't crash the wedding." "Already done. Derek's family has security watching all the local shelters. If he shows up anywhere near the Hamptons that weekend, he'll be arrested for vagrancy." They'd thought of everything, or so they believed. Walter and I spent the next month preparing countermeasures. Through my network of allies, I quietly bought up debt held by the Morrison companies. Their real estate empire was leveraged to the hilt, built on a house of cards that would collapse with the right pressure. I also discovered something interesting about the wedding venue. The Morrison estate in the Hamptons had been in their family for generations, but Robert Sr. had secretly mortgaged it to cover some bad investments. The bank holding that mortgage. It was now owned by one of my shell companies. "You own the venue where your daughter is getting married," Walter said with dark amusement. "They're literally planning to celebrate on your property." 3 weeks before the wedding, I had one final encounter with my family. All 3 children were at Sarah's apartment for a planning meeting. I'd been watching the building waiting for this opportunity. I approached just as they were leaving together. Marcus saw me first. "Oh, for fuck's sake!" Thuritom. Quick language. I said automatically, the father in me still present despite everything. Sarah looked exhausted. "Dad, please, not today. I just wanted to wish you happiness," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor I'd cultivated. "Your mother would be so proud. A June wedding? She always loved June." For a moment, Sarah's mask slipped. I saw a flicker of the daughter I'd raised, the one who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. Then Derek emerged from the building and the moment was gone. "You again?" He moved protectively in front of Sarah. "I thought we made things clear." "Crystal clear," I replied. "I know I'm not invited. I know I'm not welcome. I just wanted to see my children one last time." "Last time?" James frowned. "What do you mean, last time?" I let a sad smile cross my weathered face. "Just a feeling. Like maybe this is goodbye." They exchanged uncomfortable looks. Even Derek seemed momentarily unsettled. "Dad," Marcus said finally, "look after the wedding, we're going to get you help. A nice place where they can take care of you properly." "Somewhere with doctors," Sarah added. "Where you can get better." I nodded slowly. "If that's what you think is best." They were visibly relieved by my acceptance. They had no idea I knew about their plans about the state facility where troublesome relatives disappeared. "Take care of yourself until then," James said awkwardly. "Try to stay out of trouble." I watched them walk away, my children who'd become strangers. Derek had his arm around Sarah, already possessive of his prize. James and Marcus flanked them like bodyguards protecting their investment. 6 weeks, I whispered to myself. 6 weeks until justice. Back at the motel, Walter had set up a command center. Maps of the Morrison estate covered one wall, while another displayed photos of every major player in this drama. Guest lists, seating charts, vendor contracts. We had everything. "Final preparations," Walter asked. "Begin phase 1, I confirmed. "Start moving our people into position. Caterers, photographers, security. I want our allies everywhere." "What about the federal investigators?" "Send the packages next week. By the time of the wedding, they'll have everything they need for arrests." Walter studied me. "You know, once we do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your children. They destroyed that relationship when they stole from me and planned to lock me away," I said firmly. "This isn't about revenge, Walter. It's about justice and education." "And Sarah, she's walking into a trap with Derek." I sighed deeply. She walked into that trap with her eyes open, blinded by greed, just like her brothers. But unlike them, she might learn from what's coming. That night, I stood outside Sarah's apartment building one last time. Somewhere up there, my daughter was planning her dream wedding, unaware that every vendor, every guest list addition, every small detail was being manipulated by the father she thought was a broken drunk. In 6 weeks, the masks would come off. The truth would be revealed. And my children would finally understand the price of betrayal. But for now, I had to maintain my cover. Tomorrow, I'd return to the shelter, to the streets, to the shadows where they'd cast me. The wedding of the season was coming, and with it a reckoning none of them could imagine. 3 months before the wedding, I sat in a nondescript office building in Newark, watching as my team of lawyers and financial advisors laid out the final pieces of our strategy. The man they saw before them bore little resemblance to the disheveled vagrant my children knew. I'd cleaned up for this meeting, wearing a simple but well-tailored suit, my gray hair neatly trimmed. "Mr. Gray," said Harrison Blackwood, the lead attorney from Blackwood Sterling and Associates. The shell companies are all in place. Through various holdings, you now control 73% of Morrison Real Estate's debt portfolio. I nodded, studying the complex organizational charts spread across the conference table. Each company was registered in different states, different countries, all leading back to me through a labyrinth of legal structures that would take years to untangle. And my children's assets. Completely exposed, replied Jennifer Chen, my forensic accountant. James has been leveraging properties he doesn't technically own for business ventures. Marcus has been shorting stocks based on insider information from companies he consults for. Sarah's charity has become a massive money laundering operation for the Morrison crime family. Evidence. Ironclad, Walter confirmed from his seat at the far end of the table. Bank records, emails, recorded conversations. We've got them dead to rights. I turned to another member of my team, Patricia Reeves, a former SEC investigator I'd hired as a consultant. What about the federal investigation? Ready to go, she said. I've been in touch with my former colleagues. They're very interested in the Morrison-Whitfield financial connection. The wedding will provide the perfect opportunity to observe all the players in one location. Speaking of the wedding, said Antonio Valdez, the man I'd placed inside elite catering services. My team is fully embedded. We'll be handling the main reception dinner. I've personally vetted every server, bartender, and chef who'll be on site. I smiled. Elite Catering was the Morrison family's preferred vendor used for all their major events. It had taken months of careful maneuvering to get Antonio promoted to event coordinator, but now we controlled what would happen in the kitchen and on the floor. Security, I asked. Covered, Walter replied. Morrison hired Titan Security for the event. What he doesn't know is that Titan was quietly acquired by one of your holding companies last month. The team led Michael Foster is one of my former FBI colleagues. He's placing our people in key positions. And the guests? Harrison pulled out another folder. We've managed to get 15 of our people on the guest list. Federal prosecutors, journalists, state investigators, all attending as +1s or distant relatives. Morrison's people won't recognize them until it's too late. I stood and walked to the window looking out at the Newark skyline. Somewhere across the river, my children were living their lives confident in their stolen wealth, planning their futures with my money. What about the marriage license? I asked. Jennifer smiled. That's the beautiful part. Derek filed for the license last week. What he doesn't know is that his prenuptial agreement violates New Jersey's disclosure laws. He hid assets and debts, making the entire agreement voidable. Moreover, his failure to disclose his existing children from other relationships constitutes fraud. Existing children. I turned back to face the team. Walter pulled up photos on his laptop. 2 kids, one with a woman in Atlantic City, another with a mistress in Philadelphia. He's been paying support under the table to keep them quiet. Neither woman knows about the other, and Sarah knows about neither. I felt that familiar pang of sympathy for my daughter quickly suppressed. She'd made her choices. The timeline, I said. Walk me through it once more. Patricia stood moving to a whiteboard covered in notes. June 21st, 4 p.m. Ceremony begins at the Morrison estate. By this time, federal agents will be in position among the guests. Security cameras will be recording everything, not for Morrison's protection, but for evidence. 5:30 p.m. Antonio continued. Cocktail hour begins. Our servers will be equipped with microphones and cameras. Every conversation will be monitored and recorded. 6:30. Walter picked up. Reception dinner begins. You'll make your entrance during this time. Security will try to stop you creating the exact scene we need. And then I prompted, though I knew the plan by heart. Harrison smiled coldly. Then we reveal everything. The FBI arrests Robert Morrison Sr. for money laundering and racketeering. Derek is taken in for fraud and embezzlement. Your children face their own charges for theft, fraud, and conspiracy. All while 200 of New York's elite watch, Jennifer added. including 3 judges who've been taking bribes from Morrison. They'll be arrested too. I returned to my seat. The estate itself. Foreclosure notices will be served the morning of the wedding. Harrison confirmed. As the mortgage holder, you have every right to evict them for non-payment. However, we'll allow the wedding to proceed until the strategic moment. A knock on the door interrupted us. Harrison's assistant entered carrying a thick folder. Mr. Blackwood, these just arrived from the Cayman Islands. Harrison opened the folder, scanning quickly. His face lit up. Grayson, we've got them. These are Derek's hidden account records. He's been stealing from his own father, skimming from the money laundering operations. How much, I asked. 12 million and change. Robert Morrison has no idea. I laughed a sound that surprised even me. The thieves are stealing from each other. How poetic. Over the next 2 weeks, we refined every detail. I personally reviewed dossiers on every wedding guest, memorizing faces, relationships, and potential criminal connections. The Morrison wedding wasn't just a social event. It was a gathering of New York's corrupt elite. Judge Harold Fitzgerald, who'd fixed cases for the Morrisons for years. District Attorney Carl Brennan, whose campaign had been funded by Morrison money. Banking executives who'd helped launder millions. All would be there celebrating the union of 2 criminal dynasties. We need to be careful about collateral damage, I reminded the team during another meeting. Some guests are innocent, just society people who don't know what the Morrisons really are. Already accounted for, Walter assured me. We've identified the clean guests. Our security team will quietly evacuate them before the arrests begin. I spent days at the library studying everything about the Morrison estate. Every entrance, every exit, every room. The security systems, the staff protocols, the typical event flow. By the time I was done, I knew that house better than its owners. Meanwhile, I maintained my cover. I still slept in shelters, still shuffled through the streets during the day. But now I had purpose in my wandering. I visited locations connected to my children's crimes, photographing evidence, noting patterns. One afternoon, I followed Marcus to a meeting in a Wall Street office building. Through Walter's surveillance, I listened as he sold insider information about a pending merger to hedge fund managers. The announcement comes Monday, Marcus was saying. If you move now, you'll triple your investment by Tuesday. You're sure about this? One manager asked. My source is inside the boardroom. This is guaranteed. I made sure Walter's team recorded every word. Another nail in my son's coffin. James was equally productive in his criminality. I watched him meet with city officials, briefcases of cash changing hands in exchange for zoning variances and building permits. He was constructing an empire on bribes and corruption, just like the Morrisons. But it was Sarah who surprised me most. I'd expected simple charity fraud, but what I discovered was far worse. She was using the charity's connections to traffic prescription drugs, selling opioids to wealthy addicts, under the guise of pain management programs. Your daughter's become a drug dealer, Walter said bluntly during one of our meetings. High-class white-collar, but still dealing. I closed my eyes, remembering the little girl who'd wanted to be a doctor to help people. What had I done wrong to raise such children? It's not your fault, Walter said, reading my expression. You gave them everything and they chose to want more. Greed is a choice, Gray. They made theirs. 1 month before the wedding, we conducted our final preparations. I met with each member of the infiltration team, personally, going over their roles, their positions, their exact timing. Michael Foster, the security team lead, was particularly eager. Morrison security is a joke, he said. They're more concerned about keeping up appearances than actual protection. We'll have complete control of the venue. Remember, I cautioned, no one gets hurt physically. This is about justice, not vengeance. Understood, sir. Though I can't promise Morrison won't have a heart attack when he realizes what's happening. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a psychiatrist I'd hired to evaluate my mental state, provided crucial documentation. I've prepared multiple evaluations proving your complete mental competence, she said. Video recordings of our sessions, cognitive test results, brain scans. When your children claim you're incompetent, we'll destroy that fiction completely. The final piece fell into place 2 weeks before the wedding. Through a connection at the New York Times, I arranged for investigative journalist David Worthington to receive an anonymous tip about corruption at the wedding of the season. My source says this wedding will be ground zero for the biggest corruption scandal in New York history, David told his editor. I need to be there. Get me an invitation, the editor replied. Whatever it takes. David would attend as the +1 of a fashion blogger camera, in hand ready to document history. The night before I would leave the shelter for the last time, I lay in my narrow bunk, listening to the snores and mutters of the other residents. These men and women had become familiar to me over the months. They had real stories of loss, addiction, mental illness, bad luck. I was an imposter among them, playing at poverty while controlling hundreds of millions in hidden assets. Tomorrow I would shed this disguise. Tomorrow the game would enter its final phase. I thought about Margaret, what she would think of all this. Would she approve of my methods? Would she understand why I had to destroy our children's lives to save their souls? They were already destroyed, I whispered to her memory. I'm just showing them the truth. Walter had asked me once what I hoped to achieve. Did I want my children's love back, their respect, their fear? I want them to understand, I'd told him. To truly comprehend what they've done and why it was wrong. If they can learn from this, if they can become better people, then maybe there's hope for redemption. And if they can't, then at least justice will be served. Now, with everything in place, with all the pieces positioned perfectly on the board, I closed my eyes and waited for dawn. The wedding was in 14 days. In 2 weeks, the masks would come off, the truth would be revealed, and the house of cards my children had built would come crashing down. But first, I had to survive the next 2 weeks without tipping my hand. The hardest part of any con isn't the setup or the execution. It's the waiting. Fortunately, I'd become very good at waiting. June 21st arrived with perfect weather, as if nature itself was mocking the darkness about to unfold. I stood outside the Morrison estate at 3:45 p.m., watching limousines discharge their elegant passengers. My appearance was calculated to the smallest detail. Clothes rumpled, but not filthy, hair unkempt, but not wild, a slight tremor in my hands, but steady enough to walk without stumbling. Michael Foster's voice crackled through the tiny earpiece hidden beneath my collar. Perimeter team in position. You're clear to approach the main gate. I shuffled forward, each step measured. The security guard at the gate was one of ours, but he played his part perfectly. Sir, this is a private event. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. My daughter, I said, letting my voice crack with emotion. Sarah's getting married. I'm her father. The guard made a show of checking his list. I don't see your name here, sir. Please. I begged loud enough for arriving guests to hear. I just want to see my little girl get married. A couple I recognized as the Vanderbilts paused, whispering to each other. The woman looked sympathetic. The man looked disgusted. Perfect. What's the problem here? Derek's voice cut through the afternoon air. He strode over in his designer tuxedo, every inch the confident groom. The guard straightened. This gentleman claims to be Ms. Whitfield's father. Derek's face went through several expressions before settling on cruel amusement. Let him in. Sir, the guard feigned surprise. Let him in. Derek repeated his smile, sharp. Let everyone see what the great Grayson Whitfield has become. Put him in the back row. If he causes any disturbance, remove him. I shuffled past, muttering thanks. Derek leaned in close as I passed his cologne, overwhelming. You're going to regret coming here, old man, but first you're going to watch your daughter marry into real power. Enjoy the show. The ceremony space was breathtaking. 300 white chairs arranged on manicured lawns, an altar of roses, and baby's breath string quartet playing softly. I was led to the very last row, where two of Morrison's actual security guards flanked me. One wrong move, one whispered, "And you're out on your ass." I nodded meekly, playing my part. The guests were a who's who of New York society. I spotted Judge Fitzgerald in the third row, District Attorney Brennan, near the front. Banking executives, real estate moguls, society matrons, all gathered to celebrate a union built on crime. But scattered among them were my people. David Worthington, the journalist, snapping photos that appeared social, but were actually documenting evidence. Patricia Reeves chatting with a federal prosecutor who was officially here as someone's plus one. Antonio's catering team moving seamlessly through the crowd, their hidden cameras capturing everything. The music changed, and the wedding party began their processional. James walked first as a groomsman paired with one of Derek's cousins. He saw me and nearly stumbled, his face flushing. Marcus followed, shooting me a look of pure venom. Then came Sarah. She was radiant in a dress that probably cost more than most people's houses. Margaret's pearls graced her neck, pearls I'd given Margaret on our 10th anniversary. For a moment, just a moment, I saw my little girl again. The one who danced on my feet at her cousin's wedding, declaring she'd have a prettier dress when her turn came. Her eyes found me in the back row. Something flickered across her face. Shame, regret, before she lifted her chin and looked away. The ceremony began. Reverend Phillips, who I knew had been bribed to overlook Derek's previous marriages, droned on about love and commitment. I watched my daughter promise herself to a man who would destroy her, just as she'd destroyed me. If anyone has reason why these two should not be joined, the Reverend intoned, "Speak now or forever, hold your peace." I remained silent. The real show would come later. They exchanged rings worth more than some country's GDP. They kissed to thunderous applause. And just like that, Sarah Whitfield became Sarah Morrison, cementing the alliance between two criminal dynasties. The cocktail hour was held on the estate's massive stone terrace. I tried to blend into the background, but Derek had other plans. "Everyone, everyone," he called out, tapping a champagne flute. "I want you all to meet someone special. This is Grayson Whitfield, my new father-in-law. Grayson, come here." Hundreds of eyes turned to me. I shuffled forward, aware of the whispers, the phones coming out to record. "You see," Derek continued, his voice carrying clearly, "the Whitfields were once a proud family. Grayson here built an empire. But sometimes empires fall. Sometimes proud men become, well, look for yourselves." He gestured at me like I was an exhibit. This is why we must always be vigilant in business. Why we must protect what we build. Because without proper planning, without family members willing to step in and take control, we could all end up like poor Grayson here. "Here's to family." Someone called out clearly, one of Derek's planted supporters. "To family," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses, while I stood there, the object of their pity and scorn. Sarah appeared at Derek's side, her smile fixed and brittle. "Derek, perhaps we should—" No! Derek interrupted. "Your father came all this way. The least we can do is make him feel included." He snapped his fingers. "You there, waiter. Bring Mr. Whitfield some champagne. The good stuff. Well, maybe not the good stuff. Do we have anything from a box?" The crowd laughed. The waiter, one of Antonio's team, brought me a glass with hands that shook with suppressed anger. "Tell me, Grayson," Derek said, playing to his audience. "What happened to that famous Whitfield fortune? Oh wait, that's right. Your competent children had to take control when you lost your mind. Thank God for James Marcus and my beautiful Sarah. They saved what they could from your, shall we say, diminished capacity." Derek, Robert Morrison Sr., approached, placing a warning hand on his son's shoulder. "Enough fun. We have schedules to keep." Robert's eyes met mine briefly. Unlike his son's cruelty, I saw cold calculation there. He knew something was off, but couldn't place it. "Of course, Dad," Derek agreed. Everyone please make your way to the reception tent. Dinner will be served shortly. Grayson, your table is… Where did we put him? Oh yes, table 32. By the kitchen doors. Try not to wander off. The reception tent was a marvel of excess. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, each table decorated with centerpieces worth thousands. Table 32 was indeed by the kitchen doors the least desirable spot in the entire venue. But it gave me a perfect view of everything. I sat with other undesirable guests. Distant relatives the couple felt obligated to invite plus ones who didn't quite fit the social register. What Derek didn't know was that 3 of my table companions were federal agents. "Sir," one of them whispered, "we're ready on your signal." "Not yet," I murmured back. "Let them have their meal. Let them feel safe." The dinner service began, Antonio's team working with choreographed precision. I picked at my plate, watching Derek hold court at the head table. He was in his element, commanding attention, telling stories that painted him as a business genius, and my children as his eager protégés. "The Whitfield children came to me for advice," he was saying loudly. "Their father had left such a mess, but with Morrison guidance we've turned those assets into real wealth. It's all about knowing when to cut dead weight." Sarah laughed along, though I could see the strain in her eyes. Did she know about Derek's debts? His other women? Or was she still blinded by the fairy tale? The speeches began. Robert Morrison Sr. spoke about dynasty building, about strong bloodlines and stronger business ties. He never mentioned the bribes, the money laundering, the lives destroyed by his criminal empire. James gave a toast to his sister, joking about how she'd finally found someone who could handle the Whitfield drive for success. The same drive that had led him to steal from his own father. Marcus told stories about growing up with Sarah, carefully omitting any mention of me beyond a passing reference to family challenges overcome. Then Derek stood for the groom's speech. "My beautiful wife," he began, and the crowd awed appropriately. "You've made me the happiest man alive. And to your family, James, Marcus, even poor Grayson back there. Thank you for raising such an incredible woman." He paused, his smile turning predatory. "Speaking of Grayson, I think we should acknowledge the elephant in the room. Or should I say the beggar at the back table?" Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "You see," Derek continued, "mental illness and addiction are serious issues. They can destroy even the most successful men. That's why Sarah and I have decided to make our first act as a married couple one of charity. Grayson, would you come up here?" I stood slowly, making my way through the tables. Whispers followed my path. "Is that really him? I heard he lives on the streets now. Such a shame. He was brilliant once." The children did their best. I reached the head table where Derek waited with his shark's smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek announced, "Sarah and I will be establishing the Morrison Whitfield Foundation for Mental Health, and our first act will be ensuring that Grayson gets the help he needs. Isn't that right, Sarah?" My daughter nodded, not meeting my eyes. "We've already made arrangements with a wonderful facility. The best doctors," Derek added. "The most secure environment, because sometimes the greatest kindness is making difficult decisions for those who can't make them themselves." The crowd applauded. How generous, how caring, what a wonderful couple. "But first," Derek said, his voice dropping to a stage whisper that still carried throughout the tent, "I think Grayson should participate in one wedding tradition." He guided me toward the massive wedding cake, 5 tiers of fondant and sugar flowers. My heartbeat quickened. This wasn't part of my plan. "You know," Derek said conversationally, "at Morrison weddings we have a tradition. The oldest member of the family gets the first piece of cake. But Grayson here looks hungry, really hungry. What do you say we give him a bigger taste?" Before I could react, his hand was on the back of my head. The crowd gasped as he shoved my face into the bottom tier of the cake with crushing force. "Try some dessert, beggar," he announced triumphantly. Frosting filled my nose, my mouth. I couldn't breathe. The pressure on my head increased. Derek grinding my face deeper into the cake as some guests laughed, and others sat in shocked silence. Finally, he released me. I staggered back, gasping cake and frosting covering my face. Through the mess, I could see Sarah's horrified expression, James and Marcus laughing, recording on their phones. "Someone get him a napkin," Derek said dismissively. "Or a hose." That's when Arthur Brennan stood up. The federal prosecutor, ostensibly here as a +1, but actually one of my plants, pointed directly at me and shouted the words that would change everything. "He's a billionaire." The tent fell silent. 300 people turned to stare at Arthur, then at me. Derek laughed, but it sounded forced. "I think someone's had too much champagne." "No." Arthur continued, his voice carrying clearly. "That man you just humiliated, Grayson Whitfield, is worth $400 million, and every single person at this wedding who's participated in stealing from him is about to be arrested." The silence stretched taut as a wire. Then I smiled, wiping frosting from my eyes with deliberate slowness. "Actually, Arthur," I said, my voice clear and strong, all trace of tremor gone. "It's $450 million. The market's been good to me." And with that, the masquerade was over. The transformation was instantaneous. I straightened my spine, squared my shoulders, and wiped the remaining frosting from my face with a dignity that turned humiliation into anticipation. The tent remained frozen in silence, 300 guests struggling to process what they'd just heard. "Security!" Robert Morrison Sr. barked, but Michael Foster stepped forward, removing his tightened security jacket to reveal an FBI badge. "I'm afraid your security works for me now, Mr. Morrison," I said, my voice carrying the authority that had once commanded boardrooms. "Just like your mortgage holder, your caterers, and half your guest list." Derek's face had gone pale beneath his tan. "This is some kind of joke. You're a drunk. A homeless—" "An act," I interrupted. "Every stumble, every slurred word, every moment of degradation you and my children put me through, all carefully orchestrated. While you were busy humiliating a broken old man, I was documenting your crimes." The tent's massive screens, installed for the reception slideshow, suddenly came to life. But instead of romantic photos, they displayed bank records, emails, secretly recorded conversations. No. Robert Morrison Sr. lunged for the AV equipment, but federal agents materialized from among the guests and catering staff, blocking his path. Robert Morrison. Agent Patricia Reeves announced her credentials now visible. "You're under arrest for money laundering, racketeering, bribery, and tax evasion." As agents cuffed the senior Morrison, the screens continued their relentless display. There was Derek in Atlantic City kissing a woman who wasn't Sarah while a toddler played at their feet. Derek signing papers at a fertility clinic with another woman. Derek's massive gambling debts scrolling past like movie credits. Sarah. Derek turned to my daughter, desperation cracking his smooth facade. "Baby, this isn't what it looks like." But Sarah wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the screen showing her own crimes, the charities accounts, the prescription drug sales, the money flowing to the Morrison crime family. "Did you know?" she whispered. "Did you know who I really was when you proposed?" Derek's silence was answer enough. "He knew exactly who you were," I said, stepping closer to the head table. "Robert Morrison has been planning this for years. Destroy me through my children, then destroy my children through his son. The prenuptial agreement you signed doesn't just protect his assets, Sarah. It gives him control of yours if you're ever deemed mentally incompetent. Sound familiar?" James shot to his feet. "This is entrapment, you can't—" "Sit down, son," I commanded, and the authority in my voice made him comply instantly. "Agent Martinez, I believe you have something for James." A federal agent approached my oldest son. "James Whitfield, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and bribery of public officials." "And Marcus." I continued as another agent moved toward my middle child. "Insider trading is a serious crime, as is conspiracy to commit fraud." The screens now showed their crimes in detail. James paying off city officials. Marcus selling insider information. The forged medical documents claiming I had dementia. The systematic theft of my company, my assets, my life. "You planned this?" Sarah said, her wedding dress trembling as she shook. "You knew everything, and you let us—" "I gave you every opportunity to do the right thing," I replied. "Every time I appeared disheveled and seemingly broken, I hoped one of you would show compassion, would question what you'd done, would choose family over greed." Walter emerged from his position among the photographers, laptop in hand. "The wedding venue's rather nice, isn't it? Too bad it's being foreclosed. Mr. Morrison, you've been in default on the mortgage for 6 months. As the new owner, Mr. Whitfield could have had you all arrested for trespassing, but he wanted you to feel safe, comfortable, right up until the moment you realized you'd lost everything." "The prenup!" Derek shouted suddenly. "The prenuptial agreement protects me." "About that," said Harrison Blackwood, my attorney, standing from table 12. "Mr. Morrison, you failed to disclose several material facts in that agreement. Your existing children, your gambling debts, your criminal activities. Under New Jersey law, that's fraud, making the entire agreement void." Derek lunged at me then, but FBI agents restrained him before he could take 2 steps. "Derek Morrison," Agent Reeves announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." As they cuffed him, the screens revealed more. Derek stealing from his own father's criminal enterprise. Derek's plans to have me committed after the wedding, using a bought judge to rubber stamp the order. The same judge who was currently being arrested at table 6. 300 guests, I said, addressing the room. 57 of whom are about to be arrested for various crimes. The rest of you might want to leave before you're called as witnesses. Chaos erupted. Guests fled for the exits while federal agents moved efficiently through the crowd making arrests. The society wedding of the year had become a mass arrest, cameras rolling as David Worthington and other journalists captured every moment. "Dad," Marcus called out as agents led him away. "How could you do this to us?" "I didn't do this to you," I replied. "You did this to yourselves. Every choice, every crime, every betrayal, those were your decisions." Sarah remained at the head table, her white dress a stark contrast to the chaos around her. Tears had carved channels through her makeup. 5 years, she said quietly. "You pretended to be homeless for 5 years. You pretended to love me while planning to lock me away," I countered. Which performance was worse? She had no answer for that. District Attorney Brennan tried to slip out during the confusion, but ran directly into a team of state police. "Going somewhere, Carl," I called out. "Don't worry, the Attorney General's office has prepared a special cell just for corrupt prosecutors." Within 30 minutes, the tent was nearly empty, except for federal agents, my team, and a handful of shell-shocked guests who hadn't been arrested. Sarah still sat at the head table, her fairy tale wedding in ruins around her. "The baby," she said suddenly. "I'm pregnant." I softened slightly. "I know. That's why I've set up a trust for the child. Unlike what you did to me, I won't punish an innocent baby for the sins of its parents." "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you face consequences," I said. "The FBI has questions about your charity's drug dealing. The IRS wants to discuss unreported income. The state prosecutor is very interested in your forged medical documents about my mental capacity." "Prison." The word came out as a whisper. "Possibly. That depends on how cooperative you are. Walter has documented everything, Sarah. Every crime, every betrayal, every moment you laughed while I pretended to be broken. Your best chance is to tell the truth. All of it." She looked around the destroyed reception at the overturned chairs and abandoned champagne flutes at the wedding cake, with my face print still visible in its lower tier. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "No," I corrected. "You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." Antonio's team had begun clearing the tables with quiet efficiency. The wedding feast would go to local shelters. I'd arranged for that beforehand. At least some good would come from this obscene display of wealth. Mr. Whitfield, Agent Reeves, approached. "We need your statement, the formal one." I nodded. "Of course. But first I have something to do. I walked to the microphone Derek had used for his cruel speeches. With a tap to ensure it was still on, I addressed the remaining people in the tent. 5 years ago, my children stole everything from me based on lies about my mental capacity. They convinced the world I was a broken drunk who'd lost his mind. Tonight, you've seen the truth. I paused, looking directly at Sarah. The money never mattered. It was just numbers on a screen. What mattered was family, trust, love. They took those things and sold them for profit. But I want you all to know something, I continued. I could have destroyed them quietly, could have had them arrested privately, handled this discreetly. Instead, I chose this public reveal for one reason, so that everyone would see what greed does to a family, what happens when children value money over their own father. Mr. Morrison promised to wash away the past, I said, glancing at where Robert Sr. had been arrested. He was right. Tonight we've washed away illusions. What's left is truth. I stepped away from the microphone and walked toward the exit. Behind me I heard Sarah sobbing, the sound echoing in the nearly empty tent. Grayson, she called out. What about forgiveness? I stopped but didn't turn around. Forgiveness comes after accountability, Sarah. After you've faced what you've done and made amends. Ask me again in a few years when you've earned the right to ask. Outside, the summer evening had cooled. FBI vehicles filled the Morrison Estates circular drive, their lights painting the mansion in reds and blues. Suspects were being loaded for transport, including Derek and his father. Walter met me by my car. Not the beat-up sedan I'd been driving for cover, but my own restored vintage Mercedes. $450 million, he said with a slight smile. You lowballed it. After tonight's market close, you're worth closer to $500 million. Money's just the scorecard, I replied, never the goal. And your children? I looked back at the tent where federal agents were now cataloging evidence. They'll survive, maybe even learn. Prison has a way of providing perspective. Think they'll ever forgive you. That's not my concern, I said. My concern was justice. Teaching them what I failed to teach when I gave them everything without making them earn it. As we drove away from the Morrison estate, my estate now, technically, I thought about the morning's beginning. How Derek had shoved my face into that cake, humiliating me in front of everyone, while my children laughed and recorded. Try some dessert, beggar, he'd said. In the end, Derek was right. Revenge was sweet. But justice was a full-course meal. Behind us, the society wedding of the year continued its transformation into the scandal of the decade. By morning, it would be front-page news. The Morrison crime family's fall. My children's arrests. The revelation that the broken homeless man they'd mocked was actually the richest person at the wedding. But for now, I drove toward my real home. Not the apartment they'd stuck me in, not the shelters I'd inhabited, but the penthouse I'd quietly purchased under another name. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, trials, media circuses. Tonight, for the first time in 5 years, I would sleep in my own bed, under my own name, with my dignity intact. The hunter had returned from the hunt, and the prey never saw him coming. 1 year later, I stood in the conference room of the rebuilt Whitfield Investment Group, watching the sun set over Manhattan through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sparkled below, unaware of the drama that had unfolded in this room just minutes before. Sarah sat across from me, her appearance dramatically changed from the radiant bride of a year ago. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a simple business suit. Her perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a basic ponytail. But it was her eyes that showed the most change. Gone was the cold calculation, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years: humility. The forensic accounting is complete, she said, sliding a thick folder across the table. Every penny traced, every transaction documented. The FBI says it's the most comprehensive financial crime documentation they've ever seen. I nodded, reviewing the summary. Sarah had spent 6 months in minimum security prison before being released to house arrest in exchange for her cooperation. She'd testified against Derek, his father, and the entire Morrison criminal network. Her brothers hadn't been as fortunate. James, I asked. Still fighting the charges. His lawyer says he'll probably get 15 to 20 years. She paused. He won't speak to me. Calls me a traitor. And Marcus? Took a plea deal. 7 years out and 5 with good behavior. He's in the same facility as Derek. I set down the folder. And you, what are your plans? Sarah touched her stomach unconsciously. Emma's 8 months old now. Derek's parents are fighting for custody, but with their criminal records. She shook her head. I've been working at the Legal Aid Society helping people who've been financially exploited by their families. Ironic, isn't it? Appropriate, I corrected, using your experience to help others. We sat in silence for a moment. Through Walter's updates, I knew Sarah had been living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, working full-time, while raising her daughter alone. The courts had frozen all her assets pending the outcome of various lawsuits. She'd gone from millionaire to struggling single mother in 12 months. I dream about that cake sometimes, she said suddenly. The sound it made when Derek pushed your face into it, the way James and Marcus laughed, the way I just stood there. We all make choices, I said simply. I've been seeing a therapist, she continued. She says I developed a sense of entitlement after Mom died, that I convinced myself I deserved everything because I'd lost her. But you lost her too, and I never... Her voice cracked. I never once asked how you were doing. Not really. I poured her a glass of water from the pitcher on the table. The past can't be changed, Sarah. Only learned from. Is that why you did it, to teach us a lesson? I did it because justice demanded it. The lesson was a bonus. She managed a weak smile. Always the teacher even when playing a homeless man. Especially then. Do you know where I got the idea from? A man at the shelter, a real homeless veteran named Tom. He told me something I'll never forget. The invisible see everything because nobody's watching them. He was right. What happened to him? I hired him. He runs security for this building now. Turns out he was a Navy SEAL before addiction got him. Good man who needed a second chance. Sarah's eyes widened. The security guard who always smiles at me. That's Tom. He knows who you are, what you did. But he also believes in redemption. Says anyone can find their way back if they're willing to do the work. Am I, she asked, finding my way back? I stood and walked to the window. Tell me about your work at the Legal Aid Society. We helped 43 families last month. She said, her voice gaining strength. Elderly parents exploited by their children, adults with disabilities whose families stole their benefits. One case, this woman's son convinced her she had dementia just like we did to you. He'd taken her house, her savings, everything. We got it all back. How did it feel helping her? Like... She paused, searching for words. Like maybe I could balance the scales a little. Like maybe Emma won't have to be ashamed of me forever. I turned back to her. Emma, tell me about my granddaughter. For the first time, genuine warmth entered Sarah's eyes. She's incredible, smart, curious about everything. She has your eyes that same intensity when she's focused on something. I've been teaching her about earning things, not expecting them. She has a chore chart already. Puts her toys away, helps with simple tasks. She gets a quarter for each job. A quarter. I want her to understand that money comes from effort, not entitlement. That everything has value because someone worked for it. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo. This is what I've prepared for her. Sarah gasped. The image showed legal documents for a trust fund, but not a traditional one. It's an educational trust, I explained. Money for school, but released based on achievement and community service. She'll have opportunities, but she'll earn them. And when she's 25, if she's shown good character and work ethic, she'll inherit her full share. Not before. That's Sarah's eyes filled with tears. That's perfect, thank you. There's more. I'm restructuring Whitfield Investment Group as a family office focused on ethical investing and philanthropy. I need someone to run the charitable giving division, someone who understands both sides, how money can corrupt and how it can heal. Sarah's head snapped up. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to earn forgiveness. The position pays $60,000 a year, enough to live modestly while you rebuild. You'll report to Walter, not me. Your performance will be reviewed quarterly. Any sign of the old behavior and you're gone. I don't know what to say. Say you'll work harder than you've ever worked. Say you'll treat every dollar in those charitable funds as sacred. Say you'll teach Emma by example that wealth is a responsibility, not a right. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. I returned to my seat. Derek's trial is next month. You'll testify. Her jaw tightened. Every word of truth. He destroyed so many lives, not just ours. Those other women, their children, all the people his family's crimes hurt. He needs to pay. He will. Walter says he's looking at 30 to 40 years. His father got life without parole. Good. The word was hard final. We went over the details of her new position. She would start small managing grants to organizations helping homeless families. Ironic considering how she'd treated me, but appropriate. She would learn humility from the ground up. There's something else, I said as our meeting concluded. James and Marcus, I've put money in their prison commissary accounts. Not much, just enough for basics. And I've arranged for them to have access to education programs. When they get out, if they've changed, there might be a place for them too. Emphasis on if. That's more than they deserve. More than any of us deserve. Perhaps. But mercy without justice is meaningless, just as justice without mercy is cruel. They're facing justice now. Mercy comes later if they earn it. Sarah stood to leave, then hesitated. Dad, that night at the wedding when Derek humiliated you, why didn't you reveal yourself right then? Why let him do it? Because everyone needed to see who he really was. Who you all really were when you thought no one important was watching. The measure of a person isn't how they treat their equals, Sarah. It's how they treat those they perceive as beneath them. She nodded slowly. I failed that test. Yes, but tests can be retaken. That's what you're doing now. At the door, she turned back one final time. The homeless shelter where you stayed, do they need funding? I smiled. Ask Tom. He's on their board now. I'm sure he can give you a tour, introduce you to some residents who need legal aid services. After she left, I sat alone in the gathering darkness. The city lights below reminded me of all those nights in the shelter watching through windows at lives I was temporarily excluded from. My phone rang. Walter. How did it go? He asked. She's ready. Not healed, not forgiven, but ready to start earning both. Think she'll stick with it. I think losing everything was the best thing that could have happened to her. Rock bottom has a way of teaching lessons that privilege never could. Speaking of which, I have news about Marcus. He's enrolled in the prison's accounting program. Says he wants to learn how to handle money legally this time. Good, and James? Still angry, but his cellmate is a former CEO who went down for fraud. Man's been talking to him about redemption second chances. Maybe it'll sink in eventually. Maybe. I looked at a photo on my desk. Margaret and me with our children when they were young. Before money corrupted them. Before greed became their god. Margaret would have hated what they became. But she would have loved what you're doing now, giving them a chance to become better. After ending the call, I prepared to leave for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to rebuild what greed had destroyed. As I waited for the elevator, Tom appeared from his security rounds. Evening, Mr. Whitfield. Your daughter left looking thoughtful. She has a lot to think about, Tom. We all do, sir. That's what makes us human. The ability to think, reconsider, change course. He paused. I ever thank you proper for this job? Every day you show up is thanks enough. No, sir. You pulled me from hell, literally. That shelters, I was dying there inch by inch. Now I got purpose again. That means something. We all need purpose, Tom, and sometimes we need to lose everything to find it. The elevator arrived. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished steel. The man looking back wasn't the broken vagrant of a year ago, or the naive millionaire of 6 years past. He was something new, forged in betrayal, but tempered by justice. Outside Manhattan hummed with its eternal energy. Somewhere in Queens, my daughter was putting her baby to bed, perhaps telling her stories of redemption. Somewhere in federal prison, my sons were learning that wealth without wisdom was worthless. And somewhere in another federal facility, Derek Morrison was discovering that wedding cake tasted bitter when served in a prison cafeteria. I walked to my car thinking about the future. Whitfield Investment Group would rise again, but differently. Ethical, charitable, focused on building rather than taking. Sarah would help lead that transformation if she stayed true to her new path. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Just put Emma to bed. Told her about her grandfather who helps people. She wants to meet you when you're ready. I typed back, soon. Let's see how the first quarter goes. Understood. Good night, Dad. Good night, Sarah. It was the first time in 5 years she'd called me Dad without sarcasm or manipulation behind it. Progress. Slow, painful, but real. As I drove home through the glittering city, I thought about something else Tom had said during one of our late-night conversations at the shelter. You can't change the beginning, but you can write a new ending. My children had written a beginning filled with betrayal and greed. But the ending that was still being written. And for the first time in years, I had hope it might be worth reading. The wedding cake had been destroyed, the fairy tale shattered, the masks ripped away. But from those ruins, something new was growing. Something built on truth instead of lies, effort instead of entitlement, love instead of greed. It would take years to fully bloom. Trust once shattered rebuild slowly. But I was patient. I'd waited 5 years for justice. I could wait however long redemption required. The city faded in my rearview mirror as I headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of character for all of us. But tonight, for the first time since Margaret died, I felt something I'd thought lost forever. Peace. Justice had been served. The lessons had been taught. And maybe my family could be rebuilt on a foundation strong enough to last. Only time would tell. But I had plenty of time. And this time I'd make sure it was used wisely. How would you handle a betrayal by those closest to you? Would you seek revenge or redemption? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please consider liking and subscribing for more stories about Justice Family and the prices we pay for our choices. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about accountability and second chances, please share it with them. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the greatest gift we can give our loved ones isn't wealth, but wisdom.